If you've ever felt like your stomach was slowly inflating like a balloon throughout the day, even after eating something you thought was completely harmless, then this video is going to change the way you think about bloating forever. Because here's the thing, most people get completely wrong. Bloating is not one problem. It's at least 5 different problems that all look exactly the same from the outside. And the reason so many people spend years suffering is because they keep treating the symptom instead of actually identifying the organ that's misbehaving. So today, Dr. Lucas Whitfield is going to walk you through the entire digestive system, organ by organ, and explain exactly what's going wrong, why it's happening, and most importantly, what you can do about it starting today. And if you stay until the end, you're also going to learn a simple 2-minute manual technique you can do right now, at home, with your hands, that can physically help decompress the organs most commonly, responsible for that heavy, pregnant-feeling bloat that just won't go away. Let's start with something really fundamental that almost nobody talks about, and that is the timing and the trigger. Before you even think about supplements or protocols or any kind of intervention, the very first thing you need to do is become a detective about your own body. The single most powerful diagnostic tool you have is simply asking yourself, when exactly did this bloating start? And what did I eat or change right before it began? This sounds almost too simple, but the answer to those 2 questions alone can solve a huge percentage of bloating cases instantly, because so many people unknowingly introduce a new food, a new supplement, a new type of sweetener, or a new dietary approach and then spend months wondering why their gut is rebelling. Sugar alcohols are a perfect example of this, and they are one of the most underappreciated causes of sudden onset bloating. If you recently started a low-carb or ketogenic diet and you started consuming products that contain erythritol, xylitol, or sorbitol, your digestive system may simply not be equipped to process those compounds efficiently, and the result is significant fermentation and gas production in your gut. Similarly, if someone encouraged you to dramatically increase your vegetable intake overnight, which is actually great health advice in the long run, your gut microbiome may not yet have the bacterial diversity to handle a sudden surge of fiber, and you'll feel temporarily worse before you feel better. Cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, and cabbage are notorious for this, not because they're bad for you, but because they contain specific types of fiber and sulfur compounds that require particular microbial populations to break down properly. And if your gut doesn't have those populations in sufficient numbers yet, you're going to experience gas and bloating until it adapts. The fix in these cases is genuinely straightforward. Identify what's new, reduce or temporarily eliminate it, and reintroduce it gradually. Dairy is another very common and frequently overlooked trigger, particularly for adults who have partially or fully lost the ability to produce adequate levels of lactase, the enzyme responsible for breaking down lactose. And then, there are certain food additives that appear in healthy packaged foods, things like chicory root, inulin, or certain corn-derived fibers, that can trigger significant fermentation in people who are sensitive to them. The key point is this: if your bloating started at a specific identifiable moment and there was something new in your diet around that time, the solution is not a complicated protocol, it's simply removing that thing. Now, once you've ruled out an obvious dietary trigger and you're still dealing with chronic, unexplained bloating, that's when we need to go deeper and look at specific organs. Let's start at the top of the digestive process and work our way down, because that's exactly how digestion works. It's a chain, and if something breaks early in the chain, everything downstream suffers. The stomach is your first major digestive organ and one of the most commonly implicated in bloating, and the surprising thing is that most people assume bloating means too much acid, when in reality the far more common problem is too little acid. The stomach is supposed to be extremely acidic. We're talking a pH around 1.5 to 3.5, and that acidity serves several critical functions. It activates digestive enzymes, it begins breaking down protein, it kills off pathogenic bacteria that hitch a ride in on your food, and it triggers the downstream cascade of signals that tell your gallbladder, pancreas, and small intestine to prepare for incoming food. When stomach acid is insufficient, a condition called hypochlorhydria, food sits in the stomach longer than it should. It ferments rather than digests. The downstream signals get disrupted, and you get that heavy, uncomfortable fullness and bloating that can start even during a meal. One of the telltale clues that you're bloating is coming from insufficient stomach acid is the presence of indigestion, that sensation of food just sitting in your stomach like a brick, along with frequent burping shortly after eating, and sometimes paradoxically, what feels like heartburn, because undigested food that ferments in the stomach can push upward just as much as excess acid can. If this pattern resonates with you, there are two very practical things you can try. The first is Betaine hydrochloride, which is a supplemental form of stomach acid that you would take with protein-containing meals, typically starting with 1 or 2 capsules and gradually increasing until you find the amount that works for you, ideally under the guidance of a healthcare professional. The second is apple cider vinegar, 1 to 2 tablespoons diluted in a glass of water, taken either right before a meal or alongside it, which helps acidify the stomach environment and supports the early stages of protein breakdown. Now let's move to the gallbladder, because this is an organ that an enormous number of people either have removed or simply never think about until something goes wrong, and it plays a far more significant role in bloating than most people realize. The gallbladder's primary job is to store and concentrate bile, which is a substance produced by the liver that functions like a biological detergent. It emulsifies fat, breaks it down into tiny droplets that enzymes can act on, and facilitates the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K. When you eat a fat-containing meal, your gallbladder is supposed to squeeze and release a concentrated burst of bile into the first part of the small intestine, where it mixes with pancreatic enzymes and continues the digestive process. But when bile production is sluggish, when the bile is too thick and concentrated into sludge, or when someone no longer has a gallbladder at all, fat digestion becomes profoundly inefficient. The result is bloating, especially the kind that tends to hit hard after fatty meals, combined with burping, belching, a sense of fullness or pressure under the right side of your rib cage, and sometimes referred pain that travels up to the right shoulder, the right side of the neck, or even between the shoulder blades. If you recognize those signs, one of the most straightforward interventions is supplemental purified bile salts, which can essentially replace or augment the function of a sluggish gallbladder and dramatically improve fat digestion. There's also a simple self-assessment technique Dr. Lucas Whitfield recommends. Press your fingertips gently but firmly underneath the right side of your rib cage, not sharply, but with steady, moderate pressure, and begin to slowly massage that area in small, circular motions for about 60 to 90 seconds. If you notice your right side discomfort or bloating eases during or after this, that's a meaningful signal that your gallbladder or bile flow may be contributing to your symptoms. Moving down and slightly to the left, we come to the pancreas, and this is an organ that gets almost no attention in conversations about bloating, but is absolutely central to the digestive process. The pancreas has 2 primary roles. One is the hormonal production of insulin and glucagon to regulate blood sugar, and the other, which is what concerns us here, is the production of digestive enzymes, including lipase for breaking down fat, protease for breaking down protein, and amylase for breaking down carbohydrates. When the pancreas is under chronic stress, which is almost universally caused by a long history of high carbohydrate and high sugar consumption, its enzyme output can become compromised, and the downstream effects are significant. Food that isn't properly broken down in the small intestine will ferment, generate gas, and cause bloating. One of the distinctive signs that this may be happening for you is the presence of floating stools that appear greasy or oily. This is a condition called steatorrhea, and it indicates that dietary fat is passing through your system largely undigested because lipase is insufficient. If you suspect pancreatic enzyme insufficiency, the most direct solution is a comprehensive digestive enzyme supplement that includes lipase, protease, and amylase taken with each meal. You can also support enzyme sufficiency through diet by incorporating raw foods that are naturally rich in enzymes, fresh vegetables, fermented foods like sauerkraut and kimchi, and fresh fruits, as well as by significantly reducing your carbohydrate intake, which reduces the insulin demand on the pancreas and gives it more enzymatic bandwidth. Now we arrive at perhaps the most important and most misunderstood part of this entire discussion, and that is the small intestine. The small intestine is where the overwhelming majority of nutrient absorption actually takes place. We're talking about roughly 90% of all digestion happening here. And it's also where one of the most common and most underdiagnosed causes of chronic bloating lives, a condition called SIBO, which stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. To understand SIBO, you first need to understand that not all parts of your gut are supposed to host the same populations of bacteria. The large intestine, the colon, is designed to be absolutely teeming with microorganisms, and that's completely normal and healthy. But the small intestine is supposed to be relatively low in bacterial populations because its primary job is absorption rather than fermentation. When bacteria migrate upward from the large intestine into the small intestine, or when bacteria proliferate in the small intestine for other reasons, including things like chronic stress, antibiotic use, low stomach acid, or disrupted gut motility, you develop SIBO, and the fermentation that's supposed to happen further down in your gut is now happening in the wrong place and at the wrong time. The fermentation of food, particularly carbohydrates, fibers, and sugars, by these bacteria in the small intestine produces large quantities of gas, including hydrogen and methane, and these gases have nowhere to go quickly, so they cause the small intestine to distend, which creates that characteristic bloating that can make your abdomen visually protrude and feel tight and uncomfortable throughout most of the day. Here's one of the most diagnostically useful clues that you may have SIBO rather than a large intestine problem. If you take a probiotic supplement and your symptoms get worse rather than better, or if you consume more fiber and vegetables and your bloating intensifies, there's a strong probability that SIBO is involved, because you're essentially feeding a bacterial colony that is already overgrown and located in the wrong place. The approach to SIBO is fundamentally different from the approach to large intestine dysbiosis, and this distinction matters enormously. For SIBO, the strategy is to starve and reduce the bacterial overgrowth, not to feed and diversify it. This means temporarily removing all plant fibers from your diet. A carnivore or meat-only approach is actually extremely effective for resetting the small intestine, because animal proteins and fats provide no fermentable substrate for bacteria, and incorporating natural antimicrobial herbs like oregano oil, garlic, clove, thyme, and sage, which have demonstrated effectiveness against gram-positive and gram-negative bacterial overgrowths. Intermittent fasting is also extraordinarily powerful for SIBO management because the migrating motor complex, the wave-like cleaning mechanism that sweeps through your small intestine between meals, only activates when you're in a fasted state. And this mechanism is one of the primary natural defenses against bacterial overgrowth. The longer and more consistently you fast, the more effectively this mechanism can clean out the small intestine. Dr. Lucas Whitfield recommends working toward a daily fasting window of at least 16 hours for anyone dealing with suspected SIBO, with the understanding that this may take several weeks to show meaningful results, but the improvement can be dramatic. Now let's talk about the large intestine, which is where a completely different, and in many ways opposite, kind of bloating problem tends to originate. If the small intestine problem is one of too many bacteria in the wrong place, the large intestine problem is often one of too few bacteria or the wrong kinds of bacteria in an imbalanced ratio. The large intestine is supposed to house an extraordinarily complex and diverse community of hundreds of different bacterial species, and this community, your gut microbiome, plays a role in everything from immune function to mood regulation to metabolic rate. The fiber you eat feeds these bacteria, and when you consistently undereat fiber, certain bacterial populations decline, your microbial diversity drops, and the fermentation that's supposed to produce beneficial short-chain fatty acids like butyrate becomes dysregulated, leading to gas and bloating of a different character than what you experience with SIBO. The average person eats a genuinely alarming amount of fiber, far below any meaningful health threshold, and the result is a gut microbiome that's perpetually undernourished and struggling. If your bloating improves when you take a probiotic or when you consume fiber-rich foods like sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, or vegetables, then your problem is almost certainly in the large intestine, and the solution is the opposite of what you do for SIBO. Increase fiber, increase fermented foods, increase prebiotic diversity, and give your microbiome the substrate it needs to flourish. This is why knowing the location of your problem matters so much. The interventions for SIBO and large intestine dysbiosis are essentially opposite, and doing the wrong one will make you feel dramatically worse. There's one more factor that Dr. Lucas Whitfield wants to highlight, and it's one that most people completely underestimate: the role of chronic stress and cortisol in producing abdominal bloating. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone produced by the adrenal glands, when chronically elevated, causes inflammation and fluid retention throughout the body, including the midsection. The gut is particularly sensitive to cortisol because it's packed with stress receptors, and when cortisol is high, gut motility slows, the production of digestive secretions is impaired, and the gut's protective mucosal lining can become compromised, making it more reactive to foods that it would otherwise handle without any problem. This is why many people notice their bloating worsens dramatically during periods of intense work stress, relationship conflict, or emotional upheaval. It's not in their head, it's a genuine physiological response mediated by the cortisol-gut axis. There's also the physical component. The chronic tensing of abdominal muscles under stress can restrict circulation and lymphatic flow to digestive organs, further impairing their function. The manual massage technique Dr. Lucas Whitfield recommends is actually partly helpful because it improves local circulation and lymphatic drainage to these organs, not just because it mechanically moves gas around. To perform it, begin by placing 2 or 3 fingertips about an inch to the right of your navel and an inch or 2 below the bottom edge of your right rib cage, and press in with moderate, steady pressure, not a sharp jab, but a firm, consistent inward pressure, and then slowly massage in small circles for about 60 to 90 seconds. Then move to the corresponding area on the left side, which overlies the pancreatic body and tail, and do the same. Many people find that gas begins moving or that their sense of distension eases within minutes of performing this technique, particularly if the issue involves the gallbladder or pancreas. To pull all of this together in a way that's actually actionable, here's how Dr. Lucas Whitfield suggests you approach diagnosing and addressing your own bloating. First, look for the timing and the trigger. Identify what changed and when the bloating started. Second, pay attention to what makes your bloating better or worse. Does probiotic use help or hurt? Does eating more fiber help or hurt? The answers to these 2 questions alone will tell you whether your primary problem is likely in the small intestine or the large intestine. Third, look at your symptom patterns. Do you have indigestion, burping, and a sense of food sitting in your stomach? That points toward low stomach acid. Do you have right-sided discomfort, pain referred to the right shoulder, and bloating specifically after fatty meals? That points toward the gallbladder. Do you have greasy or floating stools alongside your bloating? That points toward the pancreas and inadequate enzyme production. And underpinning all of this, before anything else, is the quality of your overall dietary pattern. If you're eating a diet that is high in processed foods, refined carbohydrates, sugars, seed oils, and artificial additives, none of these targeted interventions will perform as well as they should, because you're constantly loading your digestive system with materials it was never designed to process. Shifting to a whole food dietary pattern with appropriate protein, healthy fats, and controlled carbohydrate intake is the single most foundational thing you can do for digestive health, and Dr. Lucas Whitfield consistently finds that for a large number of people, simply cleaning up the diet and implementing a consistent intermittent fasting window resolves bloating completely without any need for supplements or complex protocols at all. If you're ready to go deeper and you want a complete structured plan for improving your gut health and eliminating bloating for good, make sure you subscribe and check out the related videos in the playlist below, because the next video picks up exactly where this one leaves off, and together they form a complete roadmap for restoring your digestive health from the ground up. Because you deserve to feel comfortable in your own body, and understanding what's actually happening inside it is the very first step toward making that happen.